What can people tell from my IP address? Hi everyone, I'm Leo Notenboom, where I've been answering questions, well heck, I've been answering this question since 2003. Yep, this question is one of the themes that has come across the many years I've been doing Ask Leo. It comes in either of two forms. As stated, somebody has exposed their IP address, right? You know my IP address. What can you find out about me? What am I exposing by exposing my IP address on the internet? The other scenario, of course, is the reverse, where someone has an IP address of someone, perhaps someone they think is harassing them or emailing them or what, and they want to find out who they are or where they are or whatever information is available about that person because of the internet address that they've exposed. Here's the question. What exactly can someone tell from your IP address, and what can they do with it? Can they find personal details or my precise geographical location? Getting an IP address is pretty simple, but no, they typically cannot get your personal information or your precise location. Typically, because there are scenarios where, more information could be exposed or a better location could be exposed. Let's look in that a little bit more deeply. First off, finding your own IP address on the internet is actually pretty easy. If you visit my article, What's My IP Address, or any number of online services that provide this information, they'll tell you you are at IP address blah, whatever your IP address happens to be. What does that really tell you, though? Well, not as much as most people would think or TV shows would have you believe, or what many people want. Let's start with a simple, what's called reverse DNS. If you, for example, look up an IP address using a whois service or a ping, the command line that actually will try and map an IP address to a domain name, you may get a hit. For example, if you reverse DNS the IP address on which you find askleo.com, you will probably find the domain name askleo.com, or one of the content delivery network domain names that actually serve askleo.com content. Bottom line is, though, it's pretty clear that IP address is askleo.com. Whois can actually tell you where that server is located, or at least who owns it. For example, it will tell you that the server hosting askleo.com is owned by Liquid Web, a company in Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. It may or may not reside in a Michigan data center. That's information that only Liquid Web can tell. A reverse DNS may not give you much more than who owns the IP address, but not necessarily where it's located. Similarly, the IP address may map to, as I said, a content delivery network, so it's possible that it may map to something like CloudFront or StackPath or any number of other basically internet acceleration services that try and make web pages happen faster for you. Again, all that IP address will tell you is that it's being hosted by this service, but not necessarily where the service's servers are actually located. When it comes to individuals, like your home IP address, if you do a reverse DNS, you'll probably get something fairly obscure if you get something at all. More interestingly, if you do a whois lookup on the IP address, you will be told who owns the IP address. Well, who owns the IP address? Your ISP. You don't own it. You're borrowing it from them. You're leasing it from them. You're renting it from them. They're the ones that own it. They're the ones that show up in any kind of a database that is referred to by public information such as the whois lookup. So at best, someone can determine who your ISP is. They may, from the IP address, get a general sense of where the IP happens to be located. This is called geolocating. And there are different services. Sometimes you'll actually get it with the Whois server, but there are services that will try to tell you where an IP address is located. The problem is that they are notoriously inaccurate. For example, doing a Whois lookup or a geolocate on my home IP address may tell you that, yeah, I'm in Woodinville. It may tell you that, yep, I'm near Seattle. It may tell you that I'm in Western Washington. Some of them are so bad that the best they can tell you is that, yeah, he's in the United States somewhere. None of that helps. None of that tells you who I am or where I am. It just gives you some kind of a general idea of where I might be, sometimes at a relatively like city level granularity, sometimes at a region, but sometimes only to the level of the country that I happen to be located in at the time. None of this helps you get the information that you're looking for. None of this exposes your location or your identity to anybody else who might be looking. So what about those more details, right? The information that's missing is your name and address. How do people get that? Can they get that? Well, the answer is no, or rather not without help. And this is where things get weird. The issue is that if there is something legal going on, if there is something that involves law enforcement or the courts, it is conceivable, it is possible that the ISPs involved may be required to provide more granular data. They know who's paying for that IP address. They know your billing address. They know who is named on the bill. It is possible that they could be compelled by law enforcement to provide that information. It's nowhere near as easy or as quick as it seems to be on television, but it is something that is a possibility and is something that's worth knowing about. So, from your personal privacy perspective, that's the scenario that people could potentially find out who you are and where you live. It involves law enforcement. On the other side, if you are getting harassing emails or have some reason to suspect that someone at a specific IP address is doing something illegal that involves you, the only thing you can really do is contact law enforcement and hope that it rises to the level of importance that will get their attention. If not, ultimately, there's nothing that can be done. There is not information available to the general public about who owns an IP address, who is sending you that email, or where they're located. It's just not there. I've talked about the double-edged sword before because you, by nature of your using the internet, expose your IP address. When you visit askleo.com, you're sharing your IP address with my servers. There's a log that indicates where that's coming from. You want these privacy protections to be in place. You don't want random people who have your IP address to be able to identify who you are or where you're located. They can't, not without law enforcement's help. Like I said, it's a double-edged sword. That also means then that the people you might want to be tracking down are also protected by that same level of privacy. And once again, the only thing that will break through that barrier in most jurisdictions is law enforcement. I hope that was helpful. For more details, for links related to all this, and for more comments and updates, visit askleo.com/2293. I'm Leo Notenboom. This is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.